We've spent the last week or so talking about that new Bills stadium deal, which could end up costing state and Erie County taxpayers more than $1 billion over the years. Well, this is now a big sticking point in the budget battle that is playing out at the state capitol in Albany. It is clearly a dividing issue right now for Democrats who are concerned about spending $600 million in state money for the construction. Just last Friday, 20 Democratic lawmakers wrote this public letter to the governor expressing their concerns. Capitol Tonight's Nick Reisman reported today that Western New York Democrats actually had a closed-door meeting with their fellow assembly members last night, trying to defend the plan and spending all this money. And in the New York Post, an article highlighted one powerful Democratic senator's claim that she would lose votes in her district if she approved spending so much money on the new Bills stadium. And joining us live right now is the reporter behind that article, Bernadette Hogan, who covers Albany for the New York Post. Always great to see you, Bernadette. So you spoke with Democratic Senator Liz Krueger. She's chair of the Finance Committee, a big part of the budget negotiations, one of the top players in all of this. Tell us what she's saying about the pressure that she's facing from her voters, and what does it tell you about where the talks stand right now in trying to get this money approved?
Right. As you said, this is very interesting because you have a very powerful Democrat who doesn't represent Western New York or anywhere close. She represents the Upper East Side of Manhattan. And she told me yesterday that she is getting constituent calls saying, listen, I don't know if I can support a governor or a Democratic lawmaker that is supporting such a grand amount of public taxpayer dollars to build a new stadium for football. And it's just very interesting how the resonance has hit downstate as much as it has hit upstate, right? But she said, listen, we've spent quite a bit of money, public tax dollars for other stadium deals, right? Like, of course, Yankees Stadium, and then other projects like Moynihan Train Hall down in New York City. But she said this is really hitting home because the amount of money that's projected, not just in one year alone, but also in years to come, considering this deal would be live for a 30-year lease with the Buffalo Bills.
So when you talk about just the construction cost of this and the state's part of it, it's $600 million, right? And there's been some discussion out there that the governor could fund that state portion without having to get it approved as part of the budget, if in fact, enough of these lawmakers say they're not going to go along with it. How could that end? And I guess what would be the fallout from that as well? You imagine that wouldn't sit well with a lot of lawmakers if the governor kind of took that route.
Right. So that's actually a very key part that's up for debate right now. Actually, another very powerful Democrat, Senator Michael Gianaris, he's the deputy Senate majority leader. He told us he can't see how this deal won't get approved or won't need approval by the legislature. Of course, he was someone who was very key with the Amazon deal that fell through back in 2019, where that needed to be approved by this board downstate that gave the final say and eventually cut off the deal. We're not sure if something similar will have to happen here, but according to Gianaris, he says that he thinks that Kathy Hochul needs to get legislative approval. But again, we have not seen the final details of this funding plan. As you said, $600 million for construction costs. That comes from the state, but then also another pot, $250 million from Erie County residents. And then on top of that, other things in future years that will end up driving the price tag up over over $1 billion. Yeah,
we're definitely talking about a lot of money here. There's no doubt. I want to pick up on something that you mentioned a moment ago and these projects downstate that have been funded by the state of New York. You mentioned Yankee Stadium. There are other sports complexes, also some public works projects that have gotten over $1 billion at once. I wonder, what does a lawmaker like Senator Liz Krueger or any of the other ones who are expressing concern here, how do they respond when you say, look, this is a lot of money for Western New York, but this is a regional thing. This is not a city of Buffalo thing. I mean, there are Bills fans all over the state of New York. The only team, by the way, based in the state of New York. So New York gets income tax money there and other resources from the Bills being here. But what do they say when you point out to them, that there has been this money spent on downstate projects, and I guess the importance of doing this for Western New York, which maybe sometimes feels a little left out in some of the conversations that happen in Albany?
Absolutely. No, it's a very important point, especially considering, up in Buffalo, people live and breathe the Bills. But downstate in New York City, you have a multitude of other teams, right? You have the Yankees, you have the Mets, you, of course, then you go on football. you've got the Giants and the Jets. They're not even in New York City. However, the question is, what would happen if you did take those teams out of the tri-state area, or sorry, out of the metro area, right? Out of New York City, New Jersey. Would the economy collapse? What are the economic incentives, et cetera? So I think when you compare the public tax dollars that have been given to those other stadiums, those other teams, right? Yankees, the Mets, which all have received help from the state, but then comparing it to the Buffalo Bills, it is kind of a different picture, because again, you're up in Western New York, and it is very important to the economy, to those not just in the city of Buffalo, but of course the stadium is outside. It's in Orchard Park. So a lot of conversation has been around this sort of cultural or regional differences that I think has really made lawmakers spar. We've had fights in internal conferences among colleagues, among Democrats, who said, you don't understand what this means to us up here. And plus, what would it mean to say that the Buffalo Bills leave New York? As you said, the only football team that's actually in the state. But of course, then you bring up the point about the owners, right? The controversial owners, the Pegulas, who are Florida residents. They also own the Sabres, and they're a very controversial figure also in Western New York. So I think that kind of cropped up a bit with Assembly Democrats last night. There was a lot of hatred over the owners rather than the deal. And a lot of members just want to say, listen, we want to make sure that we're getting a good deal, not just for the state, but also Erie County residents, considering this will be situated right in their turf.
Bernadette, I've only got about 30 seconds left, but I want to ask you a very quick two-part question. So is this going to get done, you think, based on the conversations that you've had, despite the pushback? And what is just the latest with the budget overall? I mean, we've been told by some people not to expect anything until at least, Thursday of this week. Are we still a couple of days out before we're going to get a definitive answer?
I think lawmakers anticipating getting a deal by at least Thursday. They'll try to start voting, hopefully Thursday, Friday, maybe wrap up by the weekend. And I think this Bills Stadium deal will get through. It's the governor's priority. It's her home base. It's where she's from in Buffalo, and she's fighting for this deal. And this will be one of the hallmarks to see if she can actually negotiate and then get it done. I think this will get done absolutely, despite the grumblings and groans from Democrats and Republicans alike. But the Bills Stadium deal will get done.
Well, you are there in Albany, so it's great to get your insight on all this. Bernadette Hogan is a reporter with the New York Post, closely following the budget battle going on in Albany. And the Bills part of this, the new stadium, is just a small part of what is a massive budget. So there's a lot else to talk about as well. Bernadette, thanks for your time.
Thank you.